Hello, I just wanted to take a minute to go over this week's objectives and go over this graph that you saw or should have saw in the Ed Puzzle video that is posted this week. The objectives that I'm going to hit real quick in this video are 1, define biotic and abiotic environmental factors, and 2, interpret a graph outlining changes in population and biodiversity versus changes in abiotic environmental factors. There's a lot of words going on there, but we will define all of it right now. Okay, so you saw a graph that was similar to this in the Ed Puzzle video that's posted this week. Let's just go over what each of these parts means. So we have what is called a bell curve here, and that's just basically showing us a distribution of population in this case. So as we go up, the number of organisms for our species in question is going to increase. And then if it's lower, then we have less organisms alive of that species. And then you'll see this graph is sectioned off into different parts here. So this middle section is our optimum range. And let's say we're looking at temperature here. And then let me think of an example of an organism. Let's say we're looking at something easy to draw. I think the one in the Ed Puzzle video was fish. So we'll just go with fish. So if we're looking at how temperature, which is an abiotic factor is a part of the environment that is not alive. So that could be temperature, it could be pH, which is how acidic or how basic is that environment. It could be amount of sunlight. It could be, what else? It could be cloud cover, climate. All these things are non-living, but they are part of the environment. These non-living factors will have an effect on our living factors. In this case, we're looking at fish, and they kind of look like bow ties, but that's okay. We'll see this middle range here shows me the best temperature for fish to live. And as we get too hot, these fish will start to get stressed and their population will decrease. Or on the flip side, if it's too cold, the fish will start to get stressed, some of them will die, and their population will decrease. And the stress can be caused by a disturbance, which is what that last video was really focused on. In these areas here, where populations are stressed and begin to decrease, is called a zone of stress. This graph calls it a zone of physiological stress, which just means that physically the organisms are stressed and dying off. But still, some are alive. If we get to a point where it's just too hot for these fish, then no one is alive. Our fish are all dead. This is called a zone of intolerance, just meaning that this particular organism cannot tolerate these conditions, so they're going to die, whether it's too hot or if it's too cold. They're going to start to die. And that whole population will be killed off. We can look at the same thing if it's too acidic, too basic, or any other of these abiotic factors. Now, when we're looking at disturbances, this is why if a disturbance is too big, then it's too destructive. And that's because it's killing off all of these populations. But if there's a moderate disturbance and we stay within this zone of stress, that gives organisms a chance to evolve, which just means that they're changing and adapting to their environment, and that can create a new niche for them. And what a niche is basically a job. It's a job that an organism or population plays in the environment. So for example, honeybees, their job is to pollinate. They pollinate flowers, they make honey. That's their niche. So yeah, that's this graph. And then real quick, I just want to go over some vocab that you should have picked up along the way, but maybe it wasn't super obvious. 1, ecology, that's just the study of environments and ecosystems. An ecosystem is populations of different species that interact with each other and the abiotic factors in their environment. So it's looking at all the animals, their populations, how they interact with each other, and how they relate to the abiotic factors, which are the non-living ones. A niche, like I was saying before, is a role or a job that a particular species plays in its ecosystem. A population is the number of organisms that belong to a certain species. Zone of stress is conditions in which only some of the organisms can survive. A zone of intolerance is conditions in which organisms cannot live at all. The optimum range is the best conditions for a species to thrive. And again, abiotic factors are non-living parts of the ecosystem, including temperature, precipitation, pH, etc. This A here just means not. And biotic means living. So they are not alive, they're not living. Biotic, on the flip side, means they're living. So that's all our plants, animals, bacteria, things like that. That's everything. I just want to give you a really quick recap of what you should have pulled from those videos. And that's all.